Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, later tonight, you have a fight between heavy favorite Errol Spence, the PBC Young Fighter of the Year for 2015. He's unbeaten, and he's going up against Chris Algieri, who hit the canvas against a southpaw. Spence is a southpaw, right? Algieri hit the canvas several times against southpaw Manny Pacquiao, right? Algieri only has 8 career KOs, right? If you hear the Spence people tell it, the fight taking place in Barclays Center is not going to have a hometown fighter, right? Because while Algieri went to Stony Brook and is from Long Island, Errol Spence's family is from Long Island, right? Spence, in fact, was born out there, even though he was raised elsewhere, right? In Texas, I believe. Okay, fine. Let me just be completely blunt, then I'll explain my reasons. I think Chris Algieri is a live underdog in this fight. You know, I'll even go further than that. As good as Errol Spence looks on film, and yes, I know I sound like a crackpot, I'll let the chips fall where they may. As good as Errol Spence looks on film, I believe Chris Algieri, under his current trainer, John David Jackson, looks even better. Now let's look at film together, right? What I want you to do is to just Google here on YouTube. Just hit the search feature, right? YouTube's owned by Google. And look up Errol Spence highlights. What I want you to see is before Errol Spence's fights get stopped. You know, when Errol Spence is deep in the pocket and he's doling out punishment, just ask yourself, where are his hands? If the guy he's doling out punishment on were to throw a shot up top, does Errol Spence look to you like he has a hand up to block it? Does Errol Spence look to you like he has the awareness to roll with the punch or to lean back, Vitaly Klitschko style, and have the punch pass by him? Do you get the feeling that any of the guys Errol Spence fought, right, caused him to fear them throwing punches back when he's deep in the pocket going for the KO? Now make no mistake, Errol Spence is a short puncher, right? Very short puncher. He reminds me a lot of, let's say, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, one of the best fighters I've ever seen, right? Joe Louis, another guy who would get deep in the pocket and throw short punches. But understand, as great a fighter as Marvin Hagler was, he was in some wars, wasn't he? Right? Because short punchers need to get up close to you, don't they, to dole out the punches, right? In fact, I'll even go further and say guys who throw short punches, right, these 6-inch to 1-foot punchers, they need to know how to deal with the bullets flying back at them, don't they? So the guys Errol Spence has fought, in my opinion, haven't really tested him in that area. Errol Spence looks like he is accustomed to getting deep in the pocket, right? Once he makes an entry point and he's throwing short punches, he's a knockout puncher, right? He's accustomed to opening up on you. You're so withered, you're so hurt by his punches, right, that he doesn't have to worry about you actually trying to do anything other than cover yourself up. Now that works when you're not fighting ranked opponents. Right? Now, let me just say, Chris Algieri, by contrast, in my opinion, looking at films of his recent fights, is always thinking defensively. Right? Algieri is taking away angles from you. Right? Look at the Amir Khan fight. Right? Algieri comes in, he's throwing punches, he's leaning away from shots. I would say Amir Khan is more offensively blessed than Errol Spence. Right? Algieri can smother you while throwing volume. I don't believe Errol Spence, the big favorite in this fight, the person everyone expects to win, has dealt with the kind of volume that Chris Algieri is going to throw back at him. Right? Let me ask you two. Forget the crowd for a second. Just throw the crowd out the window. Right? If you were a young fighter traveling to Brooklyn, New York City, about to be on NBC fighting a ranked opponent in the Barclays Center, right? Forget whose side the crowd is on. Aren't you going to be nervous? Right? I'm sure Errol Spence's corner has convinced him that since he's a southpaw like Manny Pacquiao, and since Algieri looked terrible in that fight, and since Algieri only has 8 KOs, that Errol Spence can be hyper-aggressive, can walk down Chris Algieri, and can take him out, knock him down, look as good as Manny Pacquiao has looked. How many Manny Pacquiaos have you come across in the entire time as a fan you've watched boxing? Folks, they're rare. Manny Pacquiao is really an outlier. Right? There are very few Manny Pacquiaos. In fact, is there another Manny Pacquiao? Just food for thought. Right? I would argue that Manny Pacquiao is more unorthodox, is faster, is more sudden, and can throw punches from longer distance than Errol Spence. Well, let's ask the question. So, you're a relatively untested Errol Spence. Big money's behind you. You're a PBC fighter. You're traveling to New York City. You're going to fight in Brooklyn against a ranked fighter. It's your first time doing so. Aren't you going to be a tad bit nervous? In fact, aren't you going to be more nervous than a guy who's already fought against world-class competition at the Barclays Center and a couple of years ago actually won a title in the building? Right? I don't think the circumstances favor Errol Spence. I don't care who's promoting the fight. I don't care who his manager is. This is a young guy in a new situation going up against an older guy who's been there. Right? Let's talk about the crowd for a second. Now, let me say this. Right? I was raised in Cambria Heights, Queens, New York City. Right? I know Brooklyn a little bit. I know Long Island a little bit. You're going to tell me that just because you have a lot of family in the area, think about it. How many people does the Barclays Center sit? You're going to tell me because you have some family in the area that the crowd is going to be more on your side than they are the underdog Errol, no one roots for Goliath. The underdog, who is from Stony Brook, right, who won a title already at Barclays Center, who, people have known for longer than they've known Errol Spence. I'll be the most shocked man in America if this crowd isn't an Algieri crowd, especially if Algieri looks as good early as I think he's going to look. Right? Spence is going to come in, new situation. He's going to be fighting a ranked contender, and it's going to be a different dynamic. Right? Volume's coming back. The guy's not going to be just covering up and hovering when Errol Spence comes in. Spence won't be able to live deep in the pocket, throwing short punches. Right? It's going to be a battle, folks. The kind of battle that shouldn't have odds like this. I'll even go further. In a fight where you're fighting the guy who went to the local university, who lives locally, right, who has been cheered in the arena before, right, what do you think will happen on the scorecards if this fight is a toss-up and goes to the judges' scorecards? Do you really think that in a close fight where there's a local underdog, right, exceeding expectations versus a favorite who, let's face it, is more identified with Texas than Long Island, who was supposed to dominate in the fight, who hasn't gone the distance that much, right? I'm just here to tell you, there are many people who feel Algieri, and I'm one of them, who feels Algieri was ripped off on the scoring in his fight against Amir Khan, right? I'm just telling you that when a fighter gets jobbed once, and he comes back to the altar, and he throws down another great performance, a lot of fans are going to be on his side, right? I'm telling you that Evander Holyfield, after a very questionable Olympics, where he got disqualified, I'm telling you the early part of Evander's career, people felt like he had been ripped off. So fans were cheering for him. I'm telling you, Roy Jones was widely viewed as having won the gold medal in the '88 Olympics. He got ripped off. I'm telling you that Roy Jones was a sentimental favorite. Boxing fans eventually even things out. Right? Fighters who get gifts later lose close decisions. I know it's not supposed to work this way. I know people are going to say, hey, the judges are different in every fight. Judges don't think about past fights. You're kidding yourself. Right? Take Manny Pacquiao, Timothy Bradley. The second fight. Going into that fight, a lot of people, not me, but a lot of people thought Pacquiao got ripped off the first fight. So you understood if there was a photo finish in the second fight, Manny Pacquiao was likely to get the decision. Now all I'm saying here is Chris Algieri really got ripped off in the Amir Khan fight. Boxing in New York is big. You're going to have a press corps there that knows the sport. You're going to have fans there that know the sport. Right? If these two guys are standing at the end of the fight and it's questionable who's won the fight, I'm telling you, Chris Algieri is going to get the decision. I don't care how many family members Errol Spence has in the area. Right? Chris Algieri will win the decision if it goes the distance and it's a close fight. Right? Let me offer another possibility. I know Algieri only has 8 KOs. 8. Right? He has a new trainer now, folks. He's hyper offensive now. His body looks like it's at It's more natural weight. Errol Spence comes in, gets caught up in the moment. Looking on film, he looks wide open for counters. I'll even go further. You'll be surprised how guys on winning streaks, if they fall behind early, will panic. Their entire construct will go out the window. They'll suddenly start getting desperate. They'll suddenly start getting sloppy. Don't overlook the distinct possibility that the moment's too big for Errol Spence and he gets stopped in this fight. Right? As crazy as the odds are, and hey, I was recently wrong in the Manny Pacquiao-Timothy Bradley third fight. Right? As crazy as these odds are, the bet I'm recommending is the underdog, Chris Algieri, to win the fight, hedged with Spence by KO. Just look at Errol Spence's KO percentage. Right? But please understand something else. Chris Algieri has been down several times in a fight. The Manny Pacquiao fight. He was down twice early against Ruslan Provodnikov. Right? He went the distance in both fights. The judges awarded him the decision in the Provodnikov fight. Right? Chris Algieri is not going to panic if he hits the canvas. Understand, Spence is going to have to really knock him out to get the stoppage here. Right? Algieri can move when he needs to. He has a back foot game. He also has a front foot game. We haven't seen Errol Spence have to live behind a jab on his back foot yet. So look, boxing is so complicated, it's very hard to crown the next king. Right? Don't look at Errol Spence and say, you know what, he kind of reminds me of Floyd Mayweather, therefore he must be Floyd Mayweather. In boxing, nothing is proven until it's proven. I can tell you this. I already know Errol Spence does not have Floyd Mayweather's defense. There's an opening here for the underdog Chris Algieri. I like the underdog Chris Algieri to win, hedged with Spence by KO. But of course, understand the risk involved. If the big favorite, and he is a big favorite, Errol Spence, wins this fight by decision, you lose it all. Right? That's how I see it. Let me hear how you see it. I know that many of you believe that Errol Spence is the future of boxing. I know that many of you, I'm one of them, believe Chris Algieri should not have been awarded the victory over Ruslan Provodnikov. Right? I know many of you, right, remember the Manny Pacquiao-Chris Algieri fight. I know Chris Algieri had a very rough fight after the Amir Khan fight. And I'm sure many of you are also going to point out that, hey, if Chris Algieri is the hometown fighter who is predisposed to get decisions at Barclays, why did he lose a decision to Amir Khan? Let me just say, there's an exception to my rule, in my opinion. It's when a popular British fighter travels across the Atlantic, right? A lot of Englishmen in New York, right? There seems to be a London-New York connection there, right? Let's just say, though, that if Errol Spence is trying to compare himself to Miguel Cotto, right, a Puerto Rican who comes to New York and who practically owns New York, right? Several sellouts at Madison Square Garden, big fights at Barclays. He needs to understand the immigrant experience. Take it from an immigrant. The immigrant experience is different, right? It's different, right? Puerto Ricans identify with a fellow Puerto Rican who's traveling to New York, right? I'm just telling you, I expect more people at Barclays to identify with Chris Algieri. than with heavy favorite Errol Spence. Spence needs to come to grips with the fact that people view him now as Goliath. Right? Understand, while people admire dominance, right? While people will pay for dominance, the expectations are completely different. Right? Put another way, if some team out there is challenging the Golden State Warriors late in a playoff game, I'm just telling you, there are going to be a lot of people in the crowd who'll start rooting for David, not Goliath. That's just the way it goes. Right? So, I think this is a dangerous fight for Errol Spence. I don't know how his folks could have looked at the film of Chris Algieri against Amir Khan, and Algieri looks great on that film. I don't know how they could have looked at that film and then thought, you know what, our young, untested fighter who needs to be deep in the pocket and who throws short punches, this is the opponent we want for him. Let me say, Marvin Hagler, great fighter. Think about the wars he was in. John the Beast Mugabe, Mustafa Hamsho, Juan Rodin, right? Folks, these are wars. Thomas the Hitman Hearns, right? These are wars, right? Because Hagler needed to get close to you to throw those short shots, right? That's big boy boxing at the contender and championship level. Errol Spence is just now starting to experience that. It's going to be a different ball game. I think Algieri has a real chance to shock the world here. I'm going to hedge the play with Spence by KO. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Hope you leave your comments here. Thanks for stopping by.